back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys, I am here today to review some books that I am oh so excited about because I loved these books so much that I really want you to read them. And I always love coming here and chatting to you guys when I've read a book that I totally love, and I think you guys will love too. So I have 3 books to talk about. One is the start of a series, and the other 2 are the first and second in a series, which I read back to back. So I'm going to start off with the first one in a series, and that is this one, Peter Newman's The Deathless. This book really surprised me. I have read Peter Newman's other book, which is The Vagrant, and I wasn't so sure on it. I really loved elements, but I didn't love the story as a whole. I feel like it was quite a weird one and quite different from a lot of things, which obviously works for some people, but for me, I felt like there were too many questions. Whereas this book is a start of a completely different series, and this one is set in a world that I loved. It's a lot more sort of, I suppose, epic fantasy style. There are multiple POVs that we're following, and the story itself is just generally great. It's action-packed, it's adventure, it's exactly the sort of thing that I love to read about, and it was done brilliantly well. So I would thoroughly recommend this book, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this world and why. So this is a story which follows the Deathless. The Deathless are a group of people who are elevated above normal humanity, and these people can reincarnate into their descendants once they die, so essentially they are immortal. The Deathless are made up of different houses. Each one of these houses is named for a precious stone, so things like ruby, emerald, tanzanite, and in this story we predominantly follow the sapphires and the tanzanites because they are where our characters are from, and so we're following characters who are of those houses. The reason that we're following the sapphires is largely because they have recently kind of had a setback in their house, a bit of a slip, where one of the main people who is deathless, her deathless nature was revoked because of supposedly trading with the wilds, and the wilds is this untamed place full of monsters, evil things, creatures, just ungodly things that you should never come across, and it's very dark and tangled, and it's not somewhere anyone ever wants to go, but it is somewhere that the Deathless are trained to go in order to help save people and to basically fight against it. Along with the ability the Deathless have of being deathless, they also have a crystal armor which is individual to each of them, and it allows them to fly, so they can fly over the wilds. Their kingdoms, I suppose you'd call them, are set up in the air so they can look down on the wilds around them, and they have the ability to fly, which is pretty cool. So in this book we pick up the story just as Lord Rochant, who is one of the main characters, and he's one of the House Sapphire main characters, is about to be reborn into a new vessel, or one of his descendants who has been designed for the purpose of reincarnating Lord Rochant. However, of course, the ceremony does not go as planned because actually there are assassins in the building who are trying their best to not only eradicate the vessel that he is about to inhabit, but also to take out all the rest of his descendants so he cannot be reincarnated. The way the reincarnation works in this world is that the person or the vessel who you are supposed to reincarnate into has to have a similar temperament to you and has to match essentially with your personality so that you can come back as who you were and kind of bond with them and basically take over their body. Otherwise it's not going to work and it will fail. As this assassination attempt is happening, we see through the eyes of multiple different people, one of whom is Lord Rochant's lover, Lady Perry Tanzanite. She has been told by someone that there's something going to go wrong, and so she is there hoping to save her lover. The other main character that we're following in the House Sapphire is Chandri. Chandri is a young mother. She has a baby that's only just very recently been born, and she is looking after him on the time of the attack. However, the baby is one of the few heirs to Lord Rochant, and so when this attack happens, of course, she needs to be rescued and quickly hurried out of this castle, away from everything she's ever known, and that is where her story really begins. Another character that we're following is Lord Basim of the Sapphire House, the son of the woman who was cast out, and Lord Basim, since his mother was cast out, has basically sunken into a stupor of sorts. He's not really come out of his room very much, kind of drinks to excess, and he's just not really fulfilling his duty that much more than he has to. Like, the basic requirement is what he's doing. However, when he does eventually get his act together and lead a hunt out into the wilds, he finds out that there is a lot more behind his mother's banishment than he first anticipated. And of course, there are plots going on behind the scenes as ever, and he has unwittingly kind of uncovered one of them. Of the three main plot lines, I think I found Lady Perry to be the most entertaining and enjoyable. She's an elderly character because her vessel that she's kind of inhabiting right now is nearing the end of its life cycle. She probably should kind of get a new vessel at some point soon, but she wants to just see her lover be reincarnated and kind of reunite with him, so she's holding out. And she's really, really funny and witty as well. I absolutely loved her humour, and the way that she was written by Newman was just so good, and she really has a fiery personality that works incredibly well in a world as dark and bleak as this, with the wilds taking over and just intimidating people, so I loved her. On the whole, although I think the plot is a little bit slow to get going at first, after the assassination attempt excitement, it was a little bit slow and ploddy, I do feel like there is just an awful lot of excitement from that point onwards. There is so much to learn about this world that is really, really interesting, has so much potential, and is just very exciting to uncover, that I really, really enjoyed it. And I think this is going to be a book and a series that a lot of people will love. So I thoroughly recommend this, especially if you have read The Vagrant and you were a little unsure. I think this will probably be a lot more to people's liking. It's a bit more mass appeal, and I think it does a great job at that. I have to say that the magic of this world kind of largely relies on and is from the creatures that you find in the wilds, and obviously the Deathless themselves and the artifacts they have. There are a whole lot of creepy rituals that happen, kind of inspired by fairy tales, and things that we see in the dark woods and wilds that I really, really enjoyed. They're quite creepy, and in the end I found myself just completely absorbed by the story. I also will say that if you haven't listened to the audiobook, or if you like audiobooks, then probably try this on audio, because Emma Newman, who is the wife of Peter Newman, actually narrates it, and she is a professional audiobook narrator. She does a fantastic job of getting all the characters perfect and right, and they flow so well when she's reading it, and I loved the audiobook of this. I thought it was fantastic, so I really recommend that if you like audiobooks. Otherwise, read it. It's still great in book form as well. So I think it's great. It really hooked me in, and I found myself falling in love with the characters and the world, and yeah, I just love this. So if you've not already heard of this or read it, please do pick it up, because honestly, it was great, and I gave it a solid 4.5, and I'm so excited for the next one. I cannot wait for that. I think it comes out next year, so I definitely want that, and it's high on my anticipated releases list, so yeah, cannot wait to read the second. Now, on to the other two books that I wanted to review for you guys. So the other two I wanted to mention are part of the same series. The first one is called Scythe, and it's by Neil Schusterman, and the second one is called Thunderhead, obviously also by the same author because it's in the same series. And this series is a series that I had kind of very briefly seen in bookshops. I saw the cover of the first one and thought it looked really, really cool, but I wasn't sure if it would be my kind of thing. And then I think I saw it on Janet's channel. Janet from Swirly Girly Reads recommended this a while back when she read it, and she said it was really, really good, and it just kept her engrossed, and I thought, maybe I should actually consider that. And I think I saw it on someone else's channel as well, although I can't remember who. But honestly, this book blew me away. I listened to it on audio, so I'd recommend the audio, although I do plan on picking up the physical book because I loved it that much, and I love the cover. So yeah, the audiobook was great, and it's one of those stories and one of those worlds that just completely hooks you in. It got its hooks into me, and then I just couldn't stop reading or listening. I loved it. This world is based around the idea that people have basically evolved to the point where they are immortal. So it's kind of themed between the two books that I'm reviewing here, you see, immortality. But this world is a world where humans are so invincible that they can literally be brought back from the dead. If something happens, like they fall off of a bridge or they jump off of a bridge, they can, as long as they're not bathed in acid or eaten by something, they can be brought back to life, because the technology is so advanced and everything in this world, like the healthcare, is so incredible that they can literally bring someone back to life. this causes a bit of a problem for the general population of the world and kind of keeping it under control. So the idea of scythes were introduced into the world, and the scythedom is a place that the scythes join up to, and they go around and they kill people. But they don't call it killing because that would be a bit morbid. They call it gleaning, and essentially sending them on out of the world so that new people can be born. So scythes are made, they are actually chosen as apprentices, and then they go through the training for a year, and then they eventually, hopefully, achieve scythedom and become a scythe. However, it's quite a laborious process, and it's one that not everyone can get through, and it's very difficult and challenging. So we follow one scythe called Faraday, who chooses 2 apprentices, something that is quite unheard of, to follow in his footsteps, learn under his guidance for a year, and then hopefully take over from him and become a scythe in themselves as time goes on. Scythes are completely separate from every other element of the world, so the most of this world is controlled by and regulated by an AI, and this AI is not your typical sort of overlord AI. It's quite different. It feels very detached from humanity. It's there to serve humanity. It doesn't feel like it's taking over. It feels like it just has eyes everywhere and can regulate and control things. So this AI is called the Thunderhead, hence the name of book 2. And the Thunderhead is quite an interesting character in itself. We don't see too much of it in book 1, but book 2 we definitely do. And the idea is that the Thunderhead controls humanity, except for the Scythedom, which is supposed to govern itself and look after itself and hopefully basically run itself in a good way for humanity, because when the Scythedom was originally established, it was decided that it couldn't be left up to an AI to choose who and where to glean people or kill people. It had to be something that humanity would take on as its own burden and bear, because obviously it's terrible to kill people, so that was the plan. So the 2 entities are separate. And we follow 2 main characters who are our apprentices, and they are called Citra and Rowan. And they come from quite different areas in their lives. So Citra is kind of a A-star student. She's like someone who gets the top grade. She's really up for participating in everything. She's vocal, she's happy, she loves her life. Whereas Rowan, he doesn't have as good a life, really. He's kind of a bit more quiet, and he doesn't really know what he wants to do. He's not like top of the class, but he's not the bottom of the class. He's just kind of middle of the road. He's kind of average. And so it's a little bit unusual when this scythe turns up at each of their houses and decides that they are going to take on his apprenticeship. But they do, and they end up kind of training under this scythe and learning and developing and basically trying to understand what it means to be a scythe in a world where the population is ever expanding and taking over. What it means to kill people, what it means to take something from them in a world where everyone could live forever if only they had the space, what it means to take that away from someone. So I completely love this world. I think the world itself is incredibly well developed. In both of the books I've read, I feel like it gets stronger and stronger, and I can just imagine this as a real world. It would be so cool to see this as a film or something, because I can imagine it. It would be so cool. And the scythes and the scythedom are fascinating, and especially the general way that it works. It's kind of like an old parliament or government in the way that it works, and that's quite a kind of juxtaposition against this modern technology AI that we've got controlling everything else or looking after everything else. So seeing the 2 sides was really, really interesting. And there's a lot of talk about humanity and what it means to be human, what it means to be sentient, the differences between them. And I think that there is a lot of love and compassion in this series, not necessarily in a romantic way between the 2 main characters, although there is an element of that, I will just warn you now, but more so between everyone and between the sides and what they do, just generally in the world. And I think it's really interesting as a utopia which has its problems set up, and I think that's really, really cool. So that's the first book. I absolutely loved it, and I thought it was just full of twists and turns that I didn't see coming. So I gave it 5 stars because honestly it blew me away, and I was so into this. I immediately picked up book number 2, Thunderhead, and this book is very similar. It obviously carries on from the events of the first book, but by this point we are set a year in the future or almost a year in the future. And we're following the two main characters from book 1, but we also, in book number 2, have a third main character who is called Grayson. Grayson is actually a character who was raised mostly by the Thunderhead because his family kind of deserted him, and the Thunderhead kind of takes in people who aren't really being looked after and cares for them. It's kind of their job, I suppose, as the Thunderhead, the thing that is overseeing humanity. It has to look out for people who are kind of going to slip through the cracks. We don't really have a society anymore where people can slip through the cracks because there is so much that the Thunderhead sees. However, there are social experiments in some parts of the world where, like in Texas, the Thunderhead doesn't see everything as an experiment to see how it goes, and other areas like that. So Grayson's perspective, I thought, added an awful lot, and he's a really great character too. He definitely gets developed a lot in this story, so although we see the other two main characters too, and they obviously already feel fleshed out, we definitely get to see him as well. And I think that on the whole, this continued to be fantastically well developed, and there are, again, loads of things I just didn't see coming, that surprised me, that excited me, that I thought were great. So I really, really, really rate this series, and again, I gave this one 5 stars too. The Thunderhead as a character was so fantastic to see and follow, and just understanding this world more and more each time and getting familiar with it, it just keeps blowing me away. So all 3 of these books that I've just spoken about are incredible reads that I think you will love, especially if you like sci-fi and fantasy, of course. And I would love to hear if you've read them. Please do let me know in the comments, or if you plan on reading them, please go and buy them because they are so worth it. And I just, stumbled onto them all by chance, really, because I didn't have any intention of reading any of them until very recently. So very happy that I did, and I loved them. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in another video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.